everyone. Today we're going to talk about Chapter 11, Creating Sustainable Change, Emotionally Intelligent Leadership. This is cultivating resonance and driving organizational transformation. So this is how do leaders create change that actually lasts? We've already talked about emotional intelligence and leadership styles, but now the question is, how do you scale that across an entire organization? The key idea is that real transformation happens when emotionally intelligent leadership becomes part of the entire organization, not just a few individuals. Creating sustainable change. This emphasizes that sustainable change comes from weaving emotionally intelligent leadership into the organization's fabric. That means not just training people, but changing how people think, act, and interact every day. The goal is long-term impact, not short-term improvement. An example of this would be a company that runs a one-day leadership workshop versus one that changes how managers give feedback, run meetings, and evaluate performance. Organizational climate. Let's get back to resonance versus dissonance. This connects back to the earlier chapters. So as you remember, resonance is positive climate, engagement, performance, whereas dissonance is conflict, resistance, and low performance. But the key point is emotional climate determines how well change will work. If the environment is negative, even good ideas fail. So a company trying to innovate while employees feel burnt out the change won't stick. The paradox of organizational learning. This is a really important concept. Organizations rely on routine and stability to function, but change requires breaking those routines. So there's a paradox. What makes organizations efficient also makes them resistant to change. Employees say, this is how we've always done it, even when it's not working anymore. Organizations thrive on routine and the status quo. Introducing widespread new learning challenges establish systems and behaviors, making transformation inherently difficult. When leadership buildings fails, let's look at the Pacific Rim Bank case. The CEO personally improved through coaching and emotional intelligence, but when he tried to roll it out to others, it failed. Why? Because the organization wasn't set up to support it. His personal transformation through coaching didn't translate into successful widespread leadership development due to critical missteps in program implementation and prioritization. Let's look at the key failure points from the case. The training was perceived as irrelevant to the day-to-day work. There was not a visible priority. It was not made a top management priority, lacking strategic visibility. The CEO's personal learning process was kept quiet, hindering buy-in. And it was seen as just HR. It was funneled through HR, signaling lower priority to executives. The biggest takeaway is that if leadership development isn't clearly important at the top, people won't take it seriously. If a company says leadership matters, but only HR talks about it, no one's buying in. So how do we ensure leadership development success? It must be driven from the top. So it must be actively and mandated it must be mandated and actively driven from the highest levels of the organization. It must be strategic. So if it's recognized as a strategic priority by everyone, not just an HR initiative, people are more likely to buy in. And it must be involving the executive leadership. Leadership development is a business strategy, not training. Executive coaching, a safe space for leaders. Executive coaching can be a key tool. It provides a safe space, honest feedback, and deeper reflection. Leaders can talk about real challenges and emotions they wouldn't share publicly. An example is a CEO admitting uncertainty to a coach, but never in a boardroom. Executive coaching offers a confidential and trusting environment for leaders to balance vulnerability with image, explore challenges, and address core issues for themselves and their teams. Let's look at the different elements of a comprehensive coaching plan. Leadership assessment and ongoing focus on development. Work on broader organizational issues, including climate and culture, so the organizational context. Having a series of interviews and observations by a professional executive coach. And then structured assessment, including behavioral event interviews and 360-degree feedback. It's not just about the leader, it's about how they impact the organizations. This is a really interesting method. In this day in the life method, a coach follows a leader for a full day to meetings, about conversations, and to make decisions. This reveals real behavior, not just what leaders think they do. So this specialized coaching method is where the coach spends a typical day literally following and observing a leader in action, providing valuable insights into real-world interactions. Limitations of HR-led change. This slide is critical. HR alone cannot drive major change because it's seen as disconnected. Sometimes they lack authority, and it's not tied to strategy. Change must come from leadership, not just HR. HR departments are often perceived as out of touch with the day-to-day managerial issues. They alone lack the authority to drive significant behavior or culture change effectively. And true organizational change requires substantial effort, support, and resources from top leadership. But you can't ignore culture, the engine of change. This is one of the most important ideas in the chapter. Even good leadership programs fail if culture doesn't change. Culture is the engine of change. If systems and norms don't support new behaviors, people revert back. So for new leadership mindsets and behaviors to stick, the organization's culture, systems, and processes must fundamentally change to support and reinforce them. This shows what happens when culture is ignored. Even when leaders tried new behaviors, they got punished for it, so people stopped changing. Despite good intentions and a comprehensive development program, new leadership competencies failed to take hold because they directly contradicted ingrained cultural norms and practices. Common reasons why leadership initiatives fail. Ignoring reality, ignoring the real state of the organization and assuming cultural alignment. Focusing only on individuals, so attempting to change only individuals, neglecting group norms and broader culture. Wrong level, HR versus top leadership, driving the change process from the wrong place. So if it's only HR, it's probably not going to work. And then no shared language, failing to develop a meaningful and shared language of leadership. This is why many leadership programs don't work. So how can we succeed? What about a holistic leadership process? Moving beyond one-time programs to integrated, continuous development. Instead of all this one-time program, organizations need ongoing integrated development across individuals, teams, and cultures. So first, assess the culture. Understand the real versus ideal state of the organization. An example of this is doing surveys, interviews, or observations. Create resonance. Build excitement and emotional buy-in around the idea of change. People must feel the change, not just understand it. Identify future leaders. Develop people ready to lead the change. Pinpoint and develop individuals ready for top leadership roles. Not just current leaders, pipeline matters. Design continuous process. Make development ongoing, not a one-time thing. Create a multifaceted system for ongoing leadership development. And integrate learning. Embed learning into the daily work. Real change happens on the job, not just in a classroom. So let's look at some key principles of what makes development work. There's a strong tie into organizational culture and deliberate cultural change. Seminars structured around the philosophy and practice of individual change. Focus on relevant emotional intelligence competencies beyond business acumen. Creative, potent, and purpose-driven learning experiences. Supportive relationships for learning, such as learning teams and executive coaching. Let's look at the Unilever case from the chapter. They built a multi-year leadership transformation. Unilever embarked on a bold multi-year leadership development plan to fundamentally change leadership behaviors and foster an entirely new enterprising company culture. They engaged leaders at every level for cultural shift and sustained impact. Phase 1 is the top 100. They kicked off a retreat focused on personal dreams, beliefs, and fostering vulnerability among senior leaders. Phase 2, top 500. There was a series of seminars designed to put new cultural norms and visions into action across the organization. Subsequent years, business units worldwide mirrored the process, engaging individual passion and turning it toward business goals. And then ongoing alignment. Cultural change built into the leadership development, ensuring passion for strategy and accountability from senior leaders. Unilever is such a good example of this multi-phase leadership initiative. Action learning, bridging theory and reality. This is one of the most powerful tools. Teams work on real business problems while learning. Learning and doing will lead to lasting change. So projects are strategic, multidimensional, ambiguous, and new to the organization. Active executive level sponsorship in the project determination and team support. Teams work on projects receiving support in climate, norms, and conflict resolution. The process of learning itself is actively examined as part of the outcome. Projects are highly visible within the organization, increasing accountability, and dedicated resources and time for teams, allowing focus on projects. Generating buy-in and sustaining momentum. To sustain change, top leadership must participate. Mandate an active participation from the very top leadership. Make it prestigious. Make inclusion in the initiative an honor, a mark of prestige and career advantage. Create excitement. Deliberately create buzz through scripted roles, letters, and informal conversations. And then build shared language. Develop and use a consistent language of leadership for continued involvement. People need to want to be part of it. Another example is Merrill Lynch, redefining leadership for new challenges. Merrill Lynch's U.S. private client business systematically developed leaders with a focus on emotional intelligence to confront new market shifts and increase competition. Leadership development helped them stay competitive. Their comprehensive approach to change, what that included. They identified management potential in both fields and home office roles. They analyzed underlying culture to identify helpful versus inhibiting norms. They explored root issues and deep-seated reasons for success or failure within the cultural context. They constructed a leadership development agenda based on specific cultural insights, and they developed critical skills like developmental feedback, innovation, and managing diverse workforces. So what was the impact of Merrill Lynch's leadership development? There was demonstrable results and sustained cultural shifts. 40% of participants promoted to more responsible positions after the process. Systematic succession planning became more structured and future-focused, and continued top-level attention to management and cultural practices sustained ongoing change efforts. Maximizing the half-life of learning, enduring impact. Leadership programs are designed for culture competencies and individual spirit. There's adherence to principles of self-directed change, fostering personal ownership. There's a multifaceted approach focusing on individual, team, and organizational levels, and a process that results in continuous learning and enhanced capacity for change. Toward resident work and resident lives. Emotions matter enormously for leadership. Primal leadership is crucial. Emotional intelligence competencies can be cultivated and strengthened. Raising collective emotional intelligence has a far greater business impact than individual focus. Organizations can become incubators for resident leadership, benefiting people and the bottom line. So why does EI matter more now than ever before? There's an accelerated pace of business, technological change, and e-commerce growth. Globalization of the economy and rapid diversification of the workforce. Business models are becoming irrelevant quickly. There's a need for constant adaptation. The ability to manage disruptive emotions and think clearly under pressure is more important than ever. And world-class performance demands continuous improvement and resonance. So excellence redefined, the new leadership paradigm. The old model of impersonal, power-driven leadership is failing. Today's resident leaders excel in relationship building, empathy, and articulating a mission that inspires shared values. The biggest idea from this chapter is that you cannot change an organization by changing individuals alone. Real change requires leadership, culture, systems, and ongoing effort. And most importantly, people need to be emotionally engaged in the change for it to last.